Okay, let's see if we're live. Come on in. We're going to YouTube. It looks like we might well be live. Welcome, guys, to a live episode. We're going to talk about all the things, including why shaming people about vaccines is a terrible idea and it backfires. It doesn't work. We're going to talk about the Johnson & Johnson booster situation. We're going to talk about boosters in general. We talk about kids and Pfizer's data. Let's talk about everything that's going. It's just a huge dumpster fire. Look what's happening in Australia. Like, this is like what happens when you rip the fabric of society. You lock down people forever, and then you screw up a vaccine rollout. And then you tell people, well, you got to get vaccinated, but you still have to wear a mask, and you still have to do this. People lose their minds, and it's understandable. Like, it makes sense. We've kind of been screwed for this whole thing. So I see everybody pulling in here. Come on and bring your comments and stuff. I'm going to try my best, but let's talk about a few things. I've shared this across all the different platforms, so hopefully we make it happen. All right. First off, Pfizer's data. First, I want to say something. Okay. My freaking email box right now is I'm 600 emails behind. And every single one is, hey, I like what you do. You're the only person I trust because you don't treat me like an idiot for having questions about the vaccine. Here's my life story. What should I do? Right? Now, okay, I'm absolutely honored that people would send me these messages. I'm also horrified because it means that the public health officials have done just a shit job of actually educating the public. When Biden dropped his mandate, it was like, okay, I get it. They're frustrated. You know, the hospitals have unvaccinated people in them. All right. So what do? You basically push people through coercion. People that actually, you're barely even making a dent if you look at the numbers of people, right? Vinay Prasad and I went through this. You're pushing them into something called psychological reactance, where, okay, now a guy I don't like is telling me what to do with my body, right? And pretty soon my kids' bodies. We're going to talk about that. What am I going to do? I feel, first of all, I was on the edge of getting the vaccine, right? And then this happened, and now I'm like, wait a minute. So what happens? They get pushed into people who will validate their concerns. So they'll say, okay, yeah, no, you're right to be scared because here's everything that's wrong with the vaccine. So they go to BitChute and Rumble and all these places and they send me the videos. What do you think of this video? What do you think of this video? Here's my life story. Here's why I'm unique. Here's why I'm concerned. Here's why I'm worried. And you know what? A lot of their concerns are very valid concerns that I'm sure their doctors may have tried to talk to them, maybe not, because doctors don't have a lot of time. They're at their wits' end. They're overwhelmed. They're burned out. So what happens? Well, okay, now we're going to mandate it. And otherwise you lose your job. You can't make a living. Well, what are people going to do? They're going to behave like humans. They haven't been heard. They haven't had their questions answered. They're going to go to people that have definitive, absolute answers. So the Ryan Coles in Idaho, oh my God, the, what is it? Project Veritas. Oh, this vaccine is crap. And like, oh, whistleblower. Like, look, 5 seconds of watching those videos from me. And I go, oh yeah, this is obvious misinformation, conspiracy theory, moving goalposts, fake experts, cherry picking data, logical fallacies, like everything that you normally recognize. But the average person cannot make that distinction. They're going to those people because those people are validating what they were already concerned about. Maybe this will cause miscarriages. I'm worried I'll lose my baby. I've been taking fertility treatments and now they want me to get a vaccine or I'll lose my job and I'm 27 weeks pregnant. And they're telling me this. And so these emails come to me, 600 deep. I'm asking you, first of all, please, if you can avoid emailing me, if you can search my website and get the answers there, that would be so much better. But if you do email me, I don't need the life story. I've heard every life story. Just bullet me a couple questions. If I have to scroll with my thumb now, I can't even answer the email because my vision has gotten so bad in the last couple of weeks. That's why I'm making less videos. I'm answering your emails all day and I'm still 7 days behind. I had to get these from Costco. I don't wear glasses. I had to get these so I could look at my phone up close to read the text and then dictate into it because I can't type anymore. So the point being, if that's coming to me and I'm just a nobody on the internet, think of the need in the public for real information delivered non-judgmentally from someone who maybe is aligned with their skepticism. Can't government and public health officials and the medical industrial complex do that? Is it that foreign that they don't understand human psychology at even that base level, that it's left to, a clown like me? Like, this is crazy, right? These messages are legit. That's why I'm actually answering them. They're actually well put. They're generally, it's the same basic questions phrased a million different ways, but they clearly haven't gotten answers. So would you rather people then go to sources of misinformation that they can't tease out our misinformation, right? Why can't we have this conversation? That's why I think the mandates they're so counterproductive. Like, they're going to have a small blip effect. Now, I hear from people that work in, say, Alabama, South Carolina, North Carolina, who have told me, listen, your position on the mandates is totally wrong. You don't understand who these people are. These are doctors telling me this. They are unreachable. They are poisoned by misinformation. They're not educated enough to tease through it. And you just need to tell them what to do because they're not going to do it. And I was like, okay, I understand why you're so tired. I understand why you're burned out. You're banging your head against the wall. You're seeing sick people in the hospital. You have a proximity bias to the worst of this pandemic, and you're tired. Totally, absolutely get it. If I took that position, I would not get a single email, and nobody who's hesitant about vaccines would listen to anything. And the truth is, there's sometimes when I tell people, look, I don't know that getting vaccinated is the right answer for you. And there are those rare situations where it's like someone's been infected recently, they've had reactions to vaccines in terms of anaphylaxis, they're so anxious about it. It's like, well, take a break. You have some immunity right now. It's not the best immunity you can have. That would involve getting vaccinated on top of the natural infection, but you're young and otherwise healthy. Can we understand that this is a risk continuum? Like 3,000 per 1,000,000 deaths in people over, 60 or something, older people, 5 per 1,000,000 deaths in the US or less in kids. It's a different animal in different age groups and with different comorbidities, right? So we need to understand that. And David Grootman asked a question, which is good. Where is Novavax? So a lot of emails I get are this issue of Novavax. Well, I'm waiting for Novavax because it's a more traditional technology. It seems to be pretty good in the prelim data. I don't trust mRNA. I don't know why they don't trust J&J. Probably because we've poisoned the trust on J&J because, first of all, initially they were like, oh, this blood clot thing, don't, it's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. And then they paused the thing for 10 days. And it's like, So their communication is terrible. It's still super rare. Right? J&J's we're going to talk about J&J, is a pretty good option, especially in light of what they've recently released in terms of potentially a second dose, somewhere 6 months out, actually having really good effect, right? Do you even need it though? Well, it's still pretty good protection against severe disease, even with one dose. So if you want to satisfy a mandate or something, just get a J&J. And be done with it, right? That's what I tell a lot of people. Unless they're, a woman who's concerned or they've had a clotting history or one person had von Willebrand syndrome, I'm like, I don't think you should mess around with something that has this rare profile when we know the mRNA vaccines aren't associated with blood clotting, right? So that's how you kind of think about it. And this ought to be something that we have our medical complex is able to talk about. Like in medicine, we complain bitterly about people who don't do what we say. They just don't do what we say. I don't get it. And then now the hospital's full and, I've been working nonstop. All those are valid complaints. What if we actually had a prevention-minded, relationship-driven healthcare system where we got to sit with our patients and talk about what matters most to them, and we got paid to do that in some holistic way? I don't know. We had a clinic called Turntable Health that kind of fucking did that. And, you can barely make a living making that happen in those days, right? Now it's like becoming more common, this idea. But if you did that, you would actually understand what's making our patients tick, what their motivations are, actually understand what's going on, and more people would have been vaccinated. We would have been at the 80%, 85% level that Great Britain nearly got to, and that notice their per capita death is much less than ours. Their Delta surge went conk. They had other things going on, but we could have done that. But instead, we're set in a situation now where our hospitals always run at near capacity. And when there's a surge of any kind, the hospitals overflow. There was a piece in Time in 2018 saying hospitals, it sounded like it happened today with COVID. It was a flu surge in 2018 and hospitals were on divert and overwhelmed. I've been working in hospitals when we're on divert during flu seasons. Hospitals run at near capacity. That's just what they do. So you get something like COVID, people get sick, they end up overflowing a hospital, but hospitals are systems. So there's other hospitals that can pick up the slack, except when there isn't, in rural areas, in smaller states. And it's those states that are the least vaccinated. Now, let's talk about Pfizer's kids, because this is a good segue into that. So Pfizer released some top-line data where they said, okay, this is the study we did with kids, about 2,200 kids aged 5 to 11, and this is what they looked at. Because, surprise, kids don't typically get that sick from COVID. Looking at endpoints like death, hospitalization, those kind of things were not realistic. You would need huge numbers to detect a single death. Remember, I said 5 per a million deaths for kids, as opposed to 3,000 per a million in the US, or roughly, for older people. So you can't even look at that as an outcome. So you have to look at what they looked at, which is the geometric mean of antibody titers. And that means, like, what are their neutralizing antibodies in response to the vaccine? And the goal is they're non-inferior. They're not worse than what they were for 16 and up. And they found that that's true. They weren't inferior. And in their press release, they said, and it appears to be safe and well tolerated. I did not see the data actually describing that. So we haven't seen that data that I know of. And if it's there, then it'll come out. It has to come out when FDA reviews. But what we do have is antibody titers. So, okay, what does that mean? Well, they're mounting a good antibody response. Now, what's the difference between the kids dosing and the adult dosing? Adult dosing is 30 micrograms for Pfizer. Kids dosing is 10 micrograms. So it's a third the dose. And they probably did some phase 2 type immunogenicity trials, I think they did, to try to see what happens in kids at lower doses, because the higher dose is pretty high, right? And how far did they space it apart, the 2 doses? 3 weeks again. It's like you had a chance to actually go longer. I know there's an urgency. They feel there's an urgency. Is there an urgency for kids? That's a valid question. Just me asking that question will have me branded as some kind of anti-vaxxer by a medical communication establishment that can't pull its head out of its ass for COVID. We're in a wartime COVID situation, as my friend Vinay Prasad says. These guys are still in the black and white era of medical communication where it's like, oh, childhood vaccines, absolutely. Yes. No dissent here. This is a good thing, right? I was in that camp. COVID is a different beast. This disease affects young people very differently than it affects older people. There are adverse events with the vaccine in the form of myocarditis in young kids. I would love to see how that affects kids younger than 12. So this is not a black and white answer. If they start mandating based on this information, the vaccine for kids under 12, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Like, talk about psychological reactance. I'll have it. It should be an option. If they approve it, it should be an option for kids that you discuss with your pediatrician, your own risk tolerance, your kid, if they have risk factors, definitely your own sphincter tone. Like looking at my 10-year-old. Would I vaccinate my 10-year-old based on this data? No. I'd want the safety and efficacy data. And when I see that, then what would I do? Well, this is what I would do for my 10-year-old. She's healthy. She's thin. She's in a family of vaccinated people in the Bay Area of California, where we do have data on adult vaccination affecting kids. In states where adults are unvaccinated at higher rates, kids are hospitalized more with COVID. Duh. It's the New England Journal of duh. In places where there are high adult vaccination rates, like where I live, kids are much less likely to be hospitalized with COVID because it's really adults giving it to kids. So you create a cocoon effect by vaccinating vulnerable adults. You then protect kids who are less vulnerable in general to the severe effects of the disease. So I know that my kid, this is my assessment, risk assessment for my child. She has about an infinitesimally small risk of severe COVID, ending her up in the hospital or giving her long COVID or even MISC, multisystem inflammatory syndrome of children. It's just really unusual, right? It's not unheard of, but it's really unusual. So what is the upside of vaccinating her? To lower that risk to even more infinitesimal levels for her. Okay. What's the real upside? There's social pressure to do it. There's pressure from other parents who won't let her play with their kids if she's not vaccinated. There may be pressures from schools, and there's pressures from family members too that are elderly that are worried, right? Even though they're vaccinated, they don't want a child being a potential vector, and they would feel better hanging out with this child if the child were vaccinated, if it becomes FDA approved. So you kind of think through all these things for you. And that's what I tell people in the emails, right? A, this is your risk decision. You should have good information, and then you make the decision that's right for you. And I always tell people, whatever you choose, it's going to be the right decision for you because you've done it with good information if you're reading any of this, right? So that's kind of how you have to think about it, which means we need that information, and we need full information on what is the actual incidence of myocarditis. What could we be missing in that? Is there harm that we're not catching? These are reasonable questions when you're talking about healthy kids. You're not crazy to ask these questions, but they'll treat you like that online sometimes. And then you wonder why people don't want to get vaccinated, and they go right into the arms of people slinging misinformation in the form of absolutes. No, this is absolutely a terrible idea. It fills your ovaries with spike protein. You'll be totally infertile. Okay, first of all, let me just quickly, I've done videos on this. No, you won't be infertile. Lots of data saying fertility is completely unaffected. No, you won't have a miscarriage. Lots of data saying miscarriage rates are not affected by the mRNA vaccines. All right? So that's something you do. Long-term effects. In the entire history of vaccines, there's never been a long-term effect that hasn't shown up first in the first 2 months within vaccine administrations. That's just how vaccines work. But mRNA is different, but it's not. mRNA is broken down right there. It doesn't incorporate in your DNA. It causes a production of antigen. That's what vaccines do. All right. So those are things that you can talk about, right? And you can ask those questions. But we really, and there's some people who really, they're being really rational. They're like, you know what, I was infected. Why the hell do I have to go through even the side effects of the vaccine, like fevers, aches, and all that, when I'm already low risk, I'm 20, I've had COVID. Now my employer's saying I have to get a vaccine. Well, don't you think? It's like when my daughter is at school, my 13-year-old, and she's like, wait, they make us run with masks on, but they let us eat lunch in a closed facility this far from each other. Does that make sense, Dad? No, it doesn't fucking make sense. Just like vaccine mandates for a 20-year-old who's had COVID don't really make sense. Oh, but the vaccine is low risk. Look, dude, that's not how people see their own risk. You just don't understand humans at all, right? It's a real problem. And I get it. I understand it's done with good intent. I really think so. This is not some conspiracy, guys. Let me tell you about conspiracies real quick. For some reason, people want to turn to conspiracies. Brett Weinstein wants to turn to conspiracies when he talks about ivermectin. Their medical industrial complex is keeping ivermectin down. Oh, geez, Brett, we have so much fucking time to sit and think about keeping ivermectin down. Rank and file doctors, even doctors high up in leadership. We go, man, we just sit around thinking, God damn, how are we going to stop this cheap and effective drug from being released to the public because it would save lives? And we better promote our vaccines because we're getting kickbacks. Dude, shut the fuck up, Brett Weinstein. You're a smart guy. You're very articulate. You do understand science. What is wrong with you, dude? What is fucking wrong with you? Sam Harris did a really good piece about what Brett and Heather are doing. You know, I used to have a lot of fucking respect for those guys. They have jumped off the deep end of madness. Seriously. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's good for you. It's better that you don't. Like, if you have to rely on conspiracy and regulatory capture and all that to explain everything, there's something wrong with you. All right? Also, talk to a real fucking immunologist. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Ed Jenkins says, preach it, brother. I get a little, I didn't mean to curse on the show, but now it's off the rails. So, all right. So, the point being, kids, we need more data. I really hope we don't see mandates for kids. I'm glad if it's an option and it's safe. Great. Then we'll talk about it then. All right. Johnson & Johnson booster thing, I think, is interesting. They saw really good efficacy with a second dose. Unsurprising. They space out Johnson & Johnson more, so it might simply be that these boosters need to be spaced out more. And during the pandemic, we had to do these trials in a limited month frame, so they probably spaced them close together out of necessity. The better outcome, the better effect might be spacing them out more. Now with Johnson & Johnson, it's interesting because it's an adenovirus vector. So it's a human Ad6 virus that doesn't replicate. It's a replication deficient virus that's loaded with DNA that tells our cells how to make spike protein. We got to talk about Novavax too, because I got to get back to that. That was brought up earlier. That adenovirus itself is a foreign virus. So it infects the cells, injects the DNA makes spike protein, so on and so forth. All right, wonderful. But what about the virus itself? Well, when it's reintroduced with the second dose, theoretically, you can have an immune response to the virus because you've seen it now before. So that's a problem, and that may be part of the reason that they spaced out the doses more. Again, we'd have to see their data set to understand what that is. So J&J is looking interesting. I also want to see, is there any bump in vaccine-induced thrombotic thrombocytopenia, that very strange, very rare clotting disorder that can happen with J&J, particularly in women. And it's still kind of poorly understood. It's a kind of unique syndrome related to heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. So we want to get that information. Now, let's take a break in between my ranting and see if there's any sort of key questions here. A lot of comments on healthcare professionals, and they're really tired. They're really burned out. This has been like, swine flu on steroids for them. It's just really brutal. Gina Jarrett, who just joined our supporter tribe on YouTube, says, oh, where'd it go? It's gone. Okay, let me take Ilea's $20 super chat. Thank you. I love your channel and appreciate your non-biased views. I'm pro-mask, but scared to get one of the vaccines. My family and I are recluses on a mountain, limited interaction with others. We're under 50 and we're not overweight. So are you irrational? No. This is what I would say, though. I would say this, like, wouldn't it be nice to just go ahead and get the vaccine because it is safe, and take your mask off and not be a recluse? So let me rant for a second. I still don't know why the hell we're wearing masks if you're vaccinated and you're healthy and young. Sure, older people, you can talk about things like boosters, you can talk about masking, but I still don't get it. You want people to get vaccinated, let them take their damn masks off. There was like a period of, I don't know, a month where I didn't wear a mask at all anywhere, and then they mandated it again. I just love to see data that vaccinated people and masks equal better outcomes. And if you want to wear a mask, by all means, no one should shame you for doing that. But Jesus, guys, come on. Can we science this at least? Oh, Austin says, hey, do as many or more people have adverse reactions to the flu vaccines? Are the reactions similar? This is interesting. I've been thinking about this a fair bit because influenza vaccine is given every year to like 40% of the population, 30, 40%. And a lot of people say, oh, the flu shot gave me the flu. Some of that is the reactogenicity of the flu shot. So you're getting those same effects that you get with, but it's not as severe. These mRNA vaccines and something about that spike protein, because it's kind of novel, it's kind of new to humans, really gives us that aggressive immune response, right? And we don't really know why, but it's more reactogenic. So you get these short-term symptoms of fevers, muscle aches, headaches, all the brain fog, all the stuff that's immune system generated. And flu shot doesn't do that as much, right? By the way, influenza season's coming. We have no idea what it's going to be like. We just don't know. There's a lot of unknowns. Can we be comfortable with uncertainty? Yes, we should be. But the way you hedge against uncertainty is you look at your risk and you go, what risk am I willing to take? With influenza, I get the shot every year. Even if it's 40% effective, it's just less likely I'm going to end up with influenza, and it's a safe vaccine. So if you're older or you're in a risk category like young, old, definitely get that flu vax, right? And the proximity to COVID, I get this asked, I just got a COVID vaccine. When can I get a flu shot? I don't know, wait a week or two. Nobody knows, right? It doesn't really matter that much because it's a different vaccination. But the key thing is really do get it. Because if flu comes back with a vengeance, which it might, again, we don't know, it's going to suck. And the more people that are vaccinated, the less our hospitals are going to get really, really, really busy over the winter. And flu can kill you. Brandon says, hey, I know natural immunity with a vaccine, also the best immunity, but of the two, which do you think provides stronger immunity, natural immunity or full vaccination, no boosters? So it depends on whether you believe this Israeli data set. The Israeli data set, and I did a video on this, really said that natural immunity seemed to be a little more robust, but it was small numbers of actually sick people. So it's hard to know really about that. I would say this. I would say, why don't you just assume it's a wash, but that there's more variability in natural immunity? Because if you had a mild asymptomatic case, that's very different than having a rip-roaring case where you were sick for a while. So it's less predictable than vaccine. What I tell people is if you haven't been sick at all with COVID, get vaccinated 2 doses. If you've had COVID, I would love to see you get 2 doses just because you'll have unbelievable immunity, but I would love to see you get at least 1 dose because then it's a little more predictable, right? If you want to satisfy the mandates, you still have to get both, or you could just get 1 J&J and just be done with it. And that's what I say. And I think it's based on reasonable risk tolerance. But again, your mileage may vary. I was going to talk, I think I spoke a little bit about the mandates. I understand vaccine mandates. Vaccine mandates work for kids. Seatbelt mandates work for adults. As Vinay Prasad said on my show, that doesn't mean that those typically work over years. We have just a few months. Is a mandate at this stage of the pandemic going to do anything but piss people off? You may get a few incremental people in areas that, that aren't even going to really be benefited that much. And you're excluding a whole group of like 65 and olders because they're not purview of OSHA mandates because they're not typically working. And are you going to just piss people off and create more psychological reactivity that is going to impair your ability to have any effective public health in the future? Now, I'm with that. I'm really with that. It's been really, really frustrating. But again, good intent on all sides. These people are acting in good faith. It's not like they're, and then people say, well, I feel like it's a control move and this and that. I think Vinay feels that way. But, and again, it feels that it could devolve into that for sure. I tend to, again, I'm not in the Brett Weinstein, all doctors are evil and captured by pharma and all this. I just really don't believe that, as one of them. I wish I was captured by pharma. I'd be rich, bitch. What else was I going to talk about before we go to your questions? Australia. So, people rioting over mandates. Australia is a great example. And I hear from a lot of Aussies about, hey, dude, can you talk about Australia? Because we've been in lockdown. All these mandates, they fucked up the vaccine rollout. Now they're saying you have to be vaccinated and wear a mask. Police are patrolling this stuff. Australia is a pretty, they're community minded, but they're also like, when it comes to being told what to do constantly if there's no benefit here. And this is what I say. Every single human on the planet has a date with coronavirus. That's the nature of an endemic virus. At some point, you're gonna brush up against this virus. So if you've been in lockdown the whole time and you're not vaccinated, you are fucked when you brush up against that virus. It's going to tear through. Delta's going to tear through. And you're going to have to do draconian shit like a la Wuhan. Like you're going to have to go Wuhan on Melbourne if you want to stop your hospitals from being overwhelmed. Or you can just vaccinate a bunch of people, since there's not much natural immunity in Australia, as quickly as you can. Because if you're going to brush up against a virus that has an infection fatality rate of 0.2 to 0.3 across the board, but much higher if you're older and much less if you're younger, you want to brush up against it having some immunity. And that's what the vaccine does. So everybody's got a date with this thing. I'd rather, if I'm going on a date, I'd rather have a couple condoms in the purse. I don't know why I carry a purse. And I don't know why I'd be going on a date since I've been married for like 20 years. But you get what I'm saying? That's the basic premise. And the thing is, the chances that the condom's going to cause, your penis to fall off are very, very low. And that's the analogy with the vaccines. They're really quite safe. Skill Tree Gaming says, I listen to them a lot. What do you think of the better explanation for ivermectin not being used in a mainstream fashion in the US and with antibody treatments not being used everywhere and pushed? It's a great question. So why isn't ivermectin used? Because there's not good evidence that it works. And this is the thing, like the mainstream media has now glommed onto this and they've decided that ivermectin is a poison. Like you're some kind of like, sheep fucker if you use ivermectin. It's like, no. Ivermectin is a miracle drug for helmintic and parasitic infections worldwide. Like the dude who discovered it, like Nobel Prize type stuff, right? It's a great drug for that. You look, and this is the thing. This is what I don't understand. It's like doctors who do this, if you talk to them, they're like, yeah, I looked at that data. It's all observation. I mean, it's basically hydroxychloroquine level data. Like there's a lot of, and it was pretty ideologically free initially. So people could make a decision without politics interfering. Now it seems like it's gotten this ideological badge of the right and the anti-vaxxers have glommed on. So now there's all this reactance on the left, like, oh, ivermectin, no, that's garbage. Wait for the final randomized controlled trials to come out. I'm not holding my breath because as Vinay says, the pre-test probability of a therapeutic, a drug, working very well is astronomically low because they just don't. Like think about antibiotics. Those are the most successful things we have, and those work against bacteria. We've really not had things that work against viruses at that level, right? We still have the fucking common cold. So pretest probability not great. So sure, if you want to do off-label use of ivermectin, it's pretty low risk at a low dose. Who cares, right? You shouldn't be stopped from doing that if you're a doctor. It's off-label use, whatever. That's fine. The reason it's not done widespread is there's not good evidence that it works. Nothing that I've seen has compelled me. If I got sick with COVID tomorrow, there's no fucking way I would be like, oh, give me a bunch of ivermectin and a Z-Pack. That's really all it is. And the thing is, you can get smart people. Robert Malone's a smart guy. Brett Weinstein, very smart guy. Pierre Corey, I'm still not sure about him. But they'll go up and they'll talk very eloquently about the data. But then if you really listen to them, they sound batshit fucking crazy. Why do I say that? Because I'm listening as a physician and a skeptic and somebody who understands science. And it doesn't take me long. When I watched their Rogan thing, I was like, oh my God. That's when I decided I need to say something. I'm like, are you kidding me? Did he just say that? Did he just say that? Did he just say that? And again, it's not overtly cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. That's why it's very hard to tease out. Right? And who are you going to trust? If I tell you, these guys are crazy, are you going to trust me? Why? If I said that, it's an ad hominem attack. You're not going to trust me and it's not appropriate. So what I do is I go, well, get Vinay on the show. We do a whole hour on ivermectin. We look through the data set. We talk about why it's probably not enough data and then wait for the randomized control trials. Nobody's saying ivermectin doesn't work. I say, well, the probability is it doesn't work. Because you look at therapeutics. Now, monoclonal antibodies, they do work as outpatients for specific subtypes of patients to keep them from being admitted. So those should not be withheld. That's simple as that. It can be quite effective as far as we can tell, right? We give dexamethasone in the hospital, randomized control trial, recovery trial, great data, well-designed trial, pre-registered, everything good. We do it. It has a benefit on mortality. Is it a miracle drug? No, because no drugs are miracle drugs, really. There are very few. Gleevec for certain types of leukemias. There really aren't a lot of miracle drugs. Because let's be completely honest. As humans, we don't know what the fuck we're doing in medicine. We really don't. It's going to sound uncomfortable for patients to hear this. But the truth is, we're like primates we're just out of the primordial ooze. We don't understand a lot. We understand a lot more than we used to. Science is the way through. It's understanding, using the process of science to learn more about reality. But there's so much we don't get. We don't understand the mind-body connection. We don't understand the complex system that is human. And so we think, oh, we'll just put a molecule in there and that'll be enough to cure X, Y, or Z. That's not how it works. It's going to be vastly more interesting than that. And so we can't really throw our eggs in those things. Now, that's why vaccines are so interesting. Well, then, Z-Dog, what about vaccines? Vaccines are just a simple thing. It's a reductionist thing. Yeah, if you consider the immune system a reductionist thing. This is where the people are like, I like natural things. It's like, okay, then you like your immune system. Here's how you get your immune system to do something. Show it what it's supposed to fight and let it do its thing in a way that's very complex and incredibly integrated with the rest of your physiology. That's what vaccines do. That's why I fucking love vaccines. I love them because they use the body, right? It's not the body using the vaccine. The vaccine goes, hey, body, do your thing. Here's a little signal, and it works. Medicines don't do that typically. Medicines are poisons that we give at low dose, hoping the side effect of the poison is beneficial. That's really what they are. That's really what they are. I think if people really intuitively understood that, they would change even their expectations. All right, back to Novavax, Tina S. Novavax is a great, it looks really good so far, right? But again, we don't have the final data. This is how Novavax works. And this is why I always am like, wait, you'd rather have that than an adenovirus vector or an mRNA lipid nanoparticle? All right, this is how it works. They take moth cells, they grow them in culture. They infect those moth cells with a virus that only infects moth cells called a moth baculovirus. That virus injects the instructions, because it's been genetically engineered to inject instructions to tell the moth cells to make spike protein. That stuff is then slurried up and purified so that you take out the purified spike protein. That spike protein is then added to an adjuvant it's an extract of the soap bark tree. And that adjuvant boosts your immune system response to the antigen, which is the spike protein. It's a very similar approach to, say, HPV vaccine, purified protein, adjuvanted purified protein. I believe hepatitis or HPV is adjuvanted, but I have to double check on that. But it's a purified protein. And I think one of the hepatitis vaccines does that. So that's where people go, oh, this is tried and true technology, right? But it's still a pretty complicated technology because you have to purify the protein, you add this adjuvant. Yeah, it's a natural adjuvant from the soap bark tree. So that's all great. But I think if you're waiting for that vaccine, I don't think it's necessarily the best decision, because if you get infected in the interim, you're going to be like, why did I wait for that thing? And we don't even know when it's coming out. We have no idea. We don't know if FDA will ever approve it. So holding out for that, I don't think is the best answer. If you want something more in an old school approach, the J&J is closer to that. I personally like the mRNA vaccines. I really do. I think it's fucking huge. Like, wow. Like, this is great. Like, you know, it's going to transform vaccines. It might transform cancer. There's so many things that are promising with those particular vaccines. Sorry, I'm getting so fired up, I'm losing my voice. You're letting the moth cells do, says Dendel71, you're letting the moth cells do the pre-processing of the spike protein. Yeah, you are. Does that make a difference? I don't know. Think about it this way. People get very upset about the genetic engineering of the mRNA vaccines. Would you rather get infected with a virus that either, and I've said this before, either came out of a bat, went through 1 billion humans all around the world and got to you in some form, or it was engineered in a Chinese lab as a gain of function thing? Either of those choices fucking suck. Would you rather be infected with that's going to inject its own RNA into you, along with RNA polymerase and things that's where this stuff can get incorporated into you, theoretically, and I think there's been some data that can happen. These viruses can incorporate genetic code into your genome. In fact, a lot of our genome historically has been pieces of viral particles that have become part of our DNA over the years, over the millennia. Would you rather that, or would you rather something that was designed by a bunch of nerds that they're going to be taking themselves, where everyone's skin's in the game and it's controlled? I know what I would choose, but I'm a little crazy. Adam says, hey, in Western Australia, we have no COVID and no restrictions. Strong border controls have protected us. Feels like we live on a different planet. I've heard that, like Perth, Western Australia. I have some supporters in my supporter tribe from there. And it's all quiet on the Western Front. I'll say this, your border controls and things like that, they'll work until they don't. And the problem is then you're going to have rapid spread in a completely immunologically naive population. So hopefully there's a vaccine being spinned up. And I know there's going to be resistance because no one's seen even a case of coronavirus. So it's hard to feel it intuitively as a threat. But that's what I would say is like, it's great that you guys have been able to do that. Your geographic isolation helps. Every time I think about y'all, I think of Midnight Oil. Uranium companies. Why? Anyways, back to this. Ivermectin might be acting as a placebo, Adam Duarte. So, okay, let's talk about that, the mind-body connection. You give someone ivermectin, they tell you, they swear to God it made them better. You give someone a vaccine, they swear to God they had tingling, they had facial numbness, they had this muscle twitching, they had weakness in their leg, they had X, Y, Z. Put in the neurologic finding of your choice. All right. Now, yeah, sure, we got to document those and we have to investigate those. That's very important because anything can happen, right? But what's more likely? We have an unconscious or conscious expectation that something bad is going to happen. There are so many cases in medicine of this kind of conversion from an unconscious mental thing to a real neurologic syndrome. This thing like functional neurologic disorder, where there's something that happens because we don't understand humans, this mind-body continuum, this body-mind that we are, this pulsating energy pattern that we are. When you go, hey, here's a vaccine that people online have been saying is going to make your penis fall off. And then the next thing you know, you're having testicular pain, weird shit. I mean, people email me this shit. This is what I'm having. And I'll tell them, I'll go, yeah, I'm sorry you're suffering like that. You talked to your doctor about it, right? They don't have any answer for you. They have reported it to VAERS. Okay, good. Here's an article on functional neurologic disorder, and it's interesting, but give it a little time and see what happens. And a lot of times they'll email me back in a couple of weeks and be like, got better. I'm a little nervous to get the second dose. And I go, well, that's your choice. You can decide if you had that big of a reaction, even if it's mind-body, it's a real reaction, right? But this is the thing. So ivermectin, so what I just described is the nocebo effect, the opposite of the placebo effect. It's getting a negative reaction because of expectation. And the expectation does not have to be conscious. That's what people don't understand. There's data on this. You don't have to even... You can tell someone it's a placebo, and you can have unconscious expectations that actually manifest. So there's a lot of unconscious reluctance about the vaccine. It's made worse by mandates. So we're going to see more of these adverse events, I think. That's my prediction. Because people are now under duress, and they're afraid, consciously and unconsciously, and they manifest. So the placebo effect is the opposite. You get a benefit. So I think a lot of what we see with therapeutics, people claiming these miracle things are placebo effect. That's why you need placebo-controlled trials to tease it out, because you pull the placebo effect out. Man, I think I covered my topic list. How long have we been going? Oh, shit, it's like almost 5:30. Let me scroll back here and see some of the super chat questions because they're supporting our show, and I want to see if I can't attend to them a little bit. Let's see. Oh man, I can only see so many comments at a time. It won't let me scroll way back. Let me take a look. Greg says, Doctor, I sent you an email and I appreciate you responding back to it. You are an amazing. Please keep preaching the truth as you do. Your audience is looking for 100% facts. At least that's why I watch. God bless you and all your subscribers. And you gave me $50. You are very kind, Greg. I don't know if you're the same Greg who tweeted today. I think that was a Greg, about sending me an email. And this is the thing, I'm not encouraging you guys to send me emails. It's breaking my mind. It's too much. I can't do it. And it makes me feel bad because these are really good questions and people that are on the fence, and there's not enough of me, and I don't have a team to do this. I look at all my emails. There's nobody to look at it. I hope you would just look through my catalog of videos. And they have transcriptions, many of them. You can just read through. But if you do email me, just keep it like just a couple lines. I don't need the life story. I really don't, because I've heard all of the life stories. And so now I can actually just say, okay, this is what I think, But the idea that people want to have their concerns acknowledged, and they want actually someone who actually understands, like I actually am on your side on some of this stuff. I don't like it when the government tells me what to do. I don't like mandates for anything. There's a lot of stuff that I have a lot of sympathies for, but I also try to come from an alt-middle perspective where I'm like, there's a little truth on everything. You pull the truth out and you reject the shadow. And that's what I try to do. And that means, hey, in mandates, there's some good there. Like that's going to tip some people over. It's going to help with certain things. But then there's the shadow side. So let's talk about the shadow side. Well, it's going to be causing psychological reactance and so on. And I think people, to some extent, really appreciate the nuance. Now, there's some people who are just, they're so entrenched on both sides of it, you're not going to reach them. And I don't get a lot of those emails. They're not the type that are going to email me, right? They're not the type that are going to sit and watch the show. What surprised me is I've gotten very little hate mail. Usually it's, the box is full. And usually I'm just deleting emails all day because it just doesn't feel like my response is going to tip the needle in any way. But this is different, and it's exhausting, but it's good. I feel like there's a certain calling to do this at this point, which means less videos, which is too bad because I think we can reach more people with the videos. So anyways, that's my thinking. You guys are really awesome. E. Wood says, paramedic here. Coworker tested positive 10 days ago. He was symptomatic for 2 days over the weekend, went to work a day later and fever that night and other signs and symptoms. COVID November 2020, vaxxed February 21. Thoughts? My thoughts are that breakthrough infections absolutely happen. Some of them have pretty good symptoms. The idea is that the vaccine doesn't prevent necessarily, it does 5-fold reduction in breakthrough infection, but a 10-fold reduction in hospitalization and severe disease. That's where the vaccine really shines. There is, because he, let's see, he had COVID, he was vaccinated quite a while ago and got COVID a while ago. So there's probably waning immunity because they had he got vaccinated and had natural COVID relatively close to each other. And now months later, you have Delta, which is more contagious than the versions he got then. That was Alpha or less, wild type Wuhan strain. So doesn't surprise me that Delta, with its high viral loads, high contagiousness, high reproductive number, broke through that. Doesn't mean the vaccine is a bad idea. It means probably a good idea. More people should get it. And that'll lower the overall amount of low-lying dry brush that the wildfire will sweep through. Let me see. Oh man, you guys, I'm sorry. You guys are sending wonderful amounts of super chat and I really do have to go shortly, but let's answer a few. Kay Corleone, who sent like $100. Do the mRNA vaccines, specifically Pfizer, have a safety profile that is better, same, or worse than vaccines that are on our vaccine schedule in the US? This is an excellent question. So what a good question. The answer is, it depends on your age, but yes. So we've given hundreds of millions of doses now, and we haven't seen a safety signal beyond the myocarditis in the US. Now, kids' vaccines they are rarely associated with like Guillain-Barré syndrome, or actually not so much kids' vaccines. Actually, that's not true. It's more like influenza vaccine, and even that's kind of a soft association. But kids' vaccines can cause ITP, this idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura, or low platelets, and it's usually reversible. But it's something like 1 in 100,000 for MMR. So you kind of start to look at that and go, well, okay, what's the risk of myocarditis? Well, in younger people, younger men, it may be 1 in 3,000, 1 in 6,000, something like that, 1 in 14,000. So the myocarditis risk may be a little higher for that. But in general, for the average, for the adults especially, in many ways, they're as safe, if not safer. I mean, again, you're talking about safer. The childhood vaccines are super safe, right? Now, anaphylaxis, allergies, those things can happen, right? Those things can happen. And so I would say they're roughly on par. And that's a great question, right? Those are the kind of questions you kind of go, yeah. You have to think about it for a second. Go, is that really true? Yeah. It depends, because myocarditis is something you really do have to look at. Let's see. The Pokey Little Pineapple says, you're awesome. As always, no fear in discussing anything. Appreciate that. My entire military clinic watches you. Thank you for your service. One of the highlights of my life was speaking at Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas when I was there. The CEO of the hospital where I have privileges is also a reservist in the Air Force. And got me to speak out there, sweet talked me into it. And I was all resistant. I'm like, I don't know, these military guys are going to understand me. I'm a little scared. They're kind of intimidating. I show up, it was like a love fest. These guys were fans. It was beautiful. I got to watch these jets take off, crazy, crazy shit. It was so awesome. So I'm so glad to hear that. And in fact, one of our family docs at Turntable was a Air Force physician as well. Had finished her program there, and so really was fantastic, really well trained. Let me see. Matthew Small says, question, my mother got the first dose, found out the next day she had COVID. Should she get the second dose when it comes around, or should she wait a few months and start over? This is a great question. I get this a lot by email, and I can't answer individually. Like if you ask me that, I can't really answer you. You have to talk to your doctor. But this is what we don't have great data on this. The truth is you can give it on schedule. There's probably nothing wrong with that. The thing is it going to be as effective as if you were to delay it a little bit longer and give it a real booster effect? I don't know. I'm partial to spacing them out a little bit, like, 4 to 6 weeks, out. But again, this is based on kind of looking at some data, a little bit of intuition. It's a little soft. So we don't know. There's not any harm in getting it on schedule. That's the thing, right? Assuming you're no longer having symptoms and all of that. So you don't want to get it when you're having symptoms, because then you can't tease out what's vaccine and what's not. And again, it's just not as beneficial because you're already generating all these antibodies. You want that booster effect to be spread out a little bit in order to get that, reboost of the immune system. All right, I really do have to go because now I got to go manage kids and stuff. I hope this was helpful to you guys. I shared it on Facebook and Twitter and locals and all that so that people could have a chance to join in. I hope that was helpful that I did that. If you guys like what we do, we don't, we have this supporter group. It's like $5 a month. It depends on the platform you're on. Like Locals is my favorite. You can do it on YouTube and Facebook. And we kind of talk about this stuff live like every other night or so. And you get a little discussion group, and it's really kind of awesome. It's a tribe of alt-middle thinkers, really. They're really nice to each other, even though they disagree about stuff. It's just the way the internet should have been, honestly. Not gonna lie. I love it. And I love you guys. I really do. Last thing I want to say, it's interesting, like pre-pandemic and even before all this happened, there was a lot of people who were feeling like, I just don't feel like I'm even being authentically me. Like, what does all this mean? Like, I go to work, I do this, I clock in, it just doesn't, everything, whatever I accomplish doesn't feel like enough, like all this other stuff. And, they were going on psychedelic retreats and doing 5-MeO DMT and ayahuasca and psilocybin retreats and coming away going, I had a real experience. Like, that was something. Some picked up meditation, some picked up some other spiritual practice. And all I can say is this: the more I go down the path, and I'm not talking about the psychedelic path, I'm talking about the meditation path of like trying to really get in touch with what you actually are. COVID, not COVID, Republican, Democrat, all of that starts to feel like a story that's told by an imagining mind to itself. And as you start to let go of some of those trappings and release the egoic sort of cage that we're in, things get a lot easier. And more I want to talk about how we might all come together and start to work on that. Because as we wake up ourselves, the rest of the world gets changed. This idea of shaming people, this idea of mandates, this idea of like, all of this stuff starts to fall away because you go, oh, that doesn't even make sense because that person over there that I hate because of their social media post is me. Not conceptually, not even in some abstract way. It is instinctually felt that that person and I are one thing, one awareness, one consciousness. And when you see that that's what it is, this has been said through every spiritual tradition, a lot of the shit that we fight over starts to drop away, and we act spontaneously from present moment awareness without worrying, without regretting, and that's liberation. Yeah? I'm not saying I'm there. I'm saying I'm on the path with you. So let's walk it together. All right, guys, I love you so much. Until next time. Now I got to figure out how to stop this